Okay, welcome back. In this part, we're going to take a look at creating this coffee table. Now, normally when I decide to model a piece of furniture, I find a whole piece of furniture. In this case, I just found this leg online, which is by a company that obviously makes table legs. And as they only make the legs, not the tables, I just improvised. So I went online and found the average height and sort of length and breadth of a coffee table. So I used the leg as a starting point and then just put a very simple top on with a couple of lips here and a nice channel cut in it. So, this is slightly different than the bed where we just had everything was straight. So we're going to do this now, and then we're going to kick on to a much more complicated piece of furniture. But for right now, let's just start with a polycube, and let's just get that into the approximate shape of a leg here. So I'm going to just hide our coffee table that I created earlier. So just Control H to hide that. And we'll start from kind of scratch. So I'm going to get this into a nice chunky sort of leg shape. I'm not going to worry too much about the scale right now. I just want to make sure that it's got the right width to height ratio. Okay, and we're going to start off by simply modeling this curvy piece in the middle. So this is actually pretty easy to do. You got to just get used to thinking, if you haven't done much modeling in Maya, of what things will look like when they're smooth. So for instance, if I take this cube and take the vertex, if I just take the top vertex, I can see this is kind of recessed in. So if I just scale those ones down, and then I come here and I scale these ones up and out, which will be this portion, and then we go inwards quite a bit. And that's quite a big inward dip there. So you might not think this shape looks much like this shape, but if I actually smooth it, we're pretty much there. Okay, now if you want to get it sharper, you can of course, more of a bulge at the top, more of an extreme bulge. You can of course take these verts and shove them up a little bit, and we can actually do this while it's smooth, so we can see kind of what's going on while it's smoothed. Okay, and I think this probably needs to be a little thinner, so just scale it inwards. Okay, and we've got our shape. I mean, it really is that simple to create something, that's quite complicated looking on reference. So I'm just going to put this back to the unsmoothed view. And I'm just going to put a couple of control edge loops in, because when we do this, the top goes, it sinks far too much. So let's go to Insert Edge Loop, which you can get with the marking menu, which is just Shift right click, or you can use the tutorial shelf that we created earlier. Okay, so I'll put one there and one here down the bottom. Okay, so that will help us hold the smooth. If we just take a look at that, it's not so pinched at the top anymore. Okay, but still happy with the basic shape. So now we need to put all the rest of the little detailing on this. It needs a piece that comes straight up from here, then it needs to flay outwards with another piece, and then an indentation, and finally this top piece. So to do this, I'm going to use a fairly simple extrusion method. Similar sort of stuff tool that we did with the bed. So I find it easier a lot of the time to work with the unsmoothed view. And I'm going to need to select all of these faces on the top here. And I'm going to extrude those out. So once again, you can get the extrude up there, Shift right click, extrude here as well. Just make sure I didn't select any extraneous faces. I did not. So looking at the reference, that's about yay high. We'll then want to press G to extrude again, and I'm going to pull up another extrusion, and I'm just going to scale the faces outwards like so, and then G to pull up another extrusion, which would be this part here. So now we've got this part, this kind of flayed out part, this part on the top. Let's come in and actually extrude something to make this lip. And in fact, What I think I'll do there is go back one, because I don't think this is flayed out quite far enough. So let's scale it out a little bit more and maybe make it a bit taller. Okay. As I say, we're just doing this by eye, so use your best judgment. Alright, so that's fine. Push G to extrude again, and we'll extrude this part. Okay, G, one more extrusion, a very thin one, to make this indentation, and then G, and finally another extrusion to make the top part of the leg. So around there. If we now come in and select this face, shift click this one, select all those around, press G to extrude, change the handle to the middle, click the scale and just scale in. Okay, until we've got that indentation. Perfect. Alright, so we go back to object mode and it looks fairly wonky in this view, but once we smooth it, it's kind of looking pretty damn close to the reference. We've got this problem where we don't have a control loop up here, so let's just insert an edge loop at the top, just so that holds its shape a little better, and we can do the same with this lip. So one here, and actually that's a bit too close, there we go, and one here, and indeed let's put a couple on the inside. So let's stick one there. Whoops, that was the wrong thing. One there. It's a little tricky to select it, and let's see how that holds its shape. Okay, pretty perfect for me. Pretty well matching the reference. Maybe this part needs to be a little taller, but that's, you know, very easy to fix. We can at any point select all these top birds and just move it upwards, so we can come back to that. Now I want to look at this foot portion. So I'm going to lift the whole piece off the floor plane, and in fact I'm just going to hide the floor plane so we don't have to you know, continually shift this about. Now we can get a look underneath. Okay, so underneath we've got one straight down piece. So let's grab all these bottom faces. I'm just going to press Q there to take the move handle away, so I can better see what I'm doing. Okay, make sure we haven't selected any faces we don't need. We haven't. And now we can press extrude. And it's got a little lip like so. And then it does the same thing. So I'm going to press G to extrude again. Extrude down and just once again scale that. So it's sort of matching this little downward thing here. In fact, I think ours might be a tad too big. There we go. Okay, now we need one more extrusion for this straight piece at the bottom. And there we go. So I'm going to have to come in and put some control loops in again so these hold their shape. So just insert edge loop tool. So I'm just going to put one there, one here, because I want this to be held quite tightly, and the same goes for this. So one and, whoops, that's gone the wrong way, and one. Alright, now let's smooth that and see what we got. Alright, so that's a pretty close match to the reference. You might want to spend a bit more time at home, maybe pull this out so it's a little fatter. But that is, you know, good enough from the piece that I've taken my inspiration with. I now want to model this funny foot-looking thing down the bottom. And there's a myriad of ways to do this. I'm actually going to do it with an animation deformer, just because it's something we haven't looked at before. So I figured we might as well have a go at something a little different, because I'll try in this tutorial to show a few different techniques for modeling stuff. We've used some NURBS curves, and you know, in the next part we'll get into that a bit more, especially the conversion back to polygons. Let me just scale this cube up and sort of get it the right shape. I'm just going to make it a square that's about the same size as the base here. Okay, and I'm not using the 4-view at the moment. I don't really need to be that precise for this. Okay, so I've got this cube, and as I implied, we're going to use an animation deformer to deform it, but it's going to need some subdivisions. So this doesn't have a great deal of detailing in it, so I'm just going to make it 3. Okay, and then to get this shape, I'm going to go to create deformers, and I'm going to use a non-linear squash deformer. Now, if you're not using the hotbox, which is brought up by spacebar, you'll need to go to the animation menu up here, and you'll be able to find create deformers, non-linear squash up there as well. Okay, let's just put that squash deformer on, and let's bring our deformers up in the viewport. You should probably already have those on yours, but on mine they were turned off for some reason. So let's have a look at the squash. Okay, so the first thing we can do is the factor. And now you can see that really easily I can create this sort of flat shape. And again, I'm going to have to smooth for you to be able to see it properly. And that factor's probably a little too low. Okay, so just get it to a point where you're happy. I am kind of happy. Oh, and you'll see what's happened there. The other thing to note is these are animation deformers. So you can actually get some great effects by just simply moving the geometry around through the deformer. Okay, so if I decided I wanted more of a shape like so, all I have to do is pull it up. Now I can put this wherever I want to get the shape I desire. So these animation deformers can do a lot of truly great stuff for speeding up modeling. And as I said, we will be looking at a few of those in further parts. But I just wanted to introduce one now. And there's quite a few of them. You know, if you go under create deformers, this one is squash, but you've also got bend and twist and flare. And we'll look at using probably the wire tool deformer and then the twist and probably a few of these other things in the course of this tutorial too. But for right now, there's a quick squash for you. So I need to get the deformer off because obviously I'm going to want to move this and I don't want it to do this. So that being said, the easiest way to get the deformer off is just to go edit, delete by type, history. Okay, and now the deformer will be gone. So I can sort of push this into position here. Okay, and the one on the reference is actually a bit longer, which for us would just be a case of scaling a little bit in the upwards axis. And maybe ours is overall a little too big, so let's... Okay, and I'm actually going to check the positioning in that in the 4 views. Okay, so that's pretty much spot on. Alright, so there is our leg. You know, and considering it took no time at all, and all we've really done is moved out a few vertex, you can actually create some quite, you know, complicated looking shapes from very simple extrusion and, you know, just moving around a few vertex. Alright, so now we've got our leg. Let's just hide this because we don't need it anymore. Control H. Let's talk about building this into one piece. So I'm going to just group it together. Control G, and then center the pivot for it. Alright, and let's bring a floor plane in because it's easier to work with, I find anyway. And let's bring in plane 2, I think was the floor. No, there we go. So hide that once again. Now you'll see I've marked out the dimensions for the table on the floor here. It might be a little difficult to see, but our table should be 40 centimeters high, 1.3 meters long, and 65 centimeters, 1.3 meters long and 65 centimeters wide. So if we select our group leg and put it on the floor, I can now come in and scale this to the right size, which once again I'll use the 4 view for. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of the grid on this view because it's interfering here with my view. Alright, and I'll grab my 40 centimeters, which is this one. Okay, so I know I need to scale my leg down to 40 centimeters. So let's just bring up the outliner. Okay, and group 6 would be right. And I'm going to put this pivot point at the bottom here. So just insert, just move the pivot point down to the bottom of the object. Okay, insert again to go back to the normal pivot. Now when I scale it down, I don't have to keep adjusting it to get it on the floor. Alright, so now our leg is at 40 centimeters high. So we know now that that would be about the right dimension for our coffee table. And it looks good. Now we need to get them in the right position. So I'm going to duplicate this. Just Control D. And I'm going to move that. Whoops, I actually need to duplicate the group. So outliner once again, select the group, Control D, and just move this one over here till it reaches the 1 meter 30 mark, because that's how wide we know we want our table to be. So in this one, I am actually going to select both of those groups and just move them over to the start of our width, which will be the center of the grid. And then Control D to duplicate both of them, and then move them over to the 65 centimeter mark. So now I've got the basic sort of dimensions for my table laid out. I just need to get a quick top on it. And you know, coffee tables tend not to be that complicated, very plain top, and that's why I wanted to do something a little bit nicer with these legs. So let's grab a polygon cube to act as our top, and I'm just going to build here a very, very simple top. So let's get some scale on this. That's probably a little bit too much scale, but we'll sort that out in a second. Okay, and I can actually better see this in the top view. Okay, and we'll get that more exact in a second. Alright, so here's our basic table and top. That's still a bit thick. Now, we need to put some sides on. So we could, as we did with the bed, click this face over here and this one over here and bridge across. But because this is smooth, that's going to be a bit of a problem. And also, what I like to do is, I want to build these sides in a slightly unusual way, and you'll see why in a second. I just want to build them with a mortise and tenon joint on, or in this case just the tenon joint, so it won't be, well, you'll see in a second. It's easier if I just do it and try and explain it. And let's just scale this board up a bit. Let's get a thin side here. Whoops. Alright, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get this in the right position first off, and I'm going to move the top just out the way a little bit now. Alright, so I'm going to have to decide on a thickness for this table skirt. So it's not going to be that thick. Yeah, that should be about right, I think. And I'll just select the vertex on the bottom of this cube, just so I can scale it to where I want it. And I'm going to want my skirt to be a little bit thicker than that, so let's go for about that thick. And that should be about right. Whoops, let's not move those there. So I think that's about right for a table skirt, maybe a little bit thicker. But what I actually wanted to do is, if I just go back to object mode, I actually wanted to put an edge loop in across here. Okay, just about there will do. And then I want to put one in here and one in here. And then I want to grab this face and extrude it. Okay, and the reason I want to do this is because now to me this looks a bit like a tenon joint that you'd see on a piece of furniture. So let me just go back to object mode. So when I shove this in here, like so, we can actually leave a little gap showing, just like that. You know, and then when we get a close-up shot of this will create a nice shadow here, and it will make this look not quite so much like one piece of furniture. And if you do get it at sort of an extreme close-up, it's just a tiny little detail that you might catch at some point in the render that will just add a little bit of believability, and it really doesn't take any time to sort of add that in there. So, whoops, I need to extrude that outwards, not just pull it outwards, of course. Let's just go like so. And I could, of course, as well, cut the mortise hole in here and plug this in. If you want to do that, please do. But it's such a small detail for me that this will be enough. You know, I just catch that tenon joint there. You'll probably never see it at render time, but it will affect how this piece shadows on this, and it will give us some ambient occlusion, so it will just help to define the difference between the leg and the side. Might seem a little obsessive, but you know, a couple of seconds to do it, so why not do it? Alright, there we go. So duplicate this across, in position there. There we go. And of course I'm going to need some sides here, so duplicate this, pull it out, and then we'll just rotate it. So I'm going to hold J to snap the rotation. There we go. You could have always just gone and typed in the rotate 90 up here. And let's just get this into position. And the easiest way to do this one is just to grab these verts and pull it back. So we are like so. Perfect. Okay, and finally Control D, and there we go. Alright, so top can come back on. So now we've got our legs and our skirt looking rather nice, I think. You know, for a simple little coffee table, I really kind of like those legs. That's why I originally yanked the picture off the internet. Just something about them. I find the shape quite pleasing. But anyway, you can use sort of the same technique to make any pattern if you find something else you like. Right, so first things first, let's put a edge on this table. Okay, sorry folks if the picture just jumped on you. I had a small crash with Maya. The recording software causes it to be a bit unstable. And I believe we were about to put an edge on this tabletop. So what I want to do with it is create a decorative lip and a decorative channel that goes all the way around. So a really simple way to create just a lip around here would be to go to insert some edge loops. Okay, and it just wants to be a very small lip. So I'm going to make these quite close to the edges. In this case, we're not going to smooth this, so these are not edge loops for smoothing. They're just to create a lip around the table. And we'll do that by selecting the face and just extruding upwards. Just a little bit. Okay, so it just creates a little lip there, and that might even be too much. There we go. Okay, so I want to cut a channel around also. So to do that, I'm going to have to put some more edge loops in, which we can get to either with our tutorial shelf or of course the marking menu. And just a little channel around the center, around the outside of the table, like so. So what I'll do is I'll draw these edge loops in a square, and then I'll extrude them downwards to create a small channel. Okay, and I've said before many times, but you might want to take some time to use the fore-view when you do this to get this kind of perfectly square. But even eyeballing it in, it's pretty good. Okay, final one, sort of here and here. Okay, now I'm going to need to select these faces. Okay, so just select all the faces that I want to extrude downwards to make this channel. Okay, and that should be the last of it. Alright, so let's hit extrude. And let's find the extrusion handle, which will be there. Lovely jubbly. And just push downwards a little bit. There we go. That makes a little channel around the outside. Now, you know, this is a coffee table, so in our case, it's not going to be too fancy. But I do want to get a few detail bits in there, so it's not completely boring. But you will notice that as we look around this, you know, it's very difficult to pick out these details, and that's because this is a solid hard edge, which very rarely happens in nature, especially on a piece of furniture. So you would never get this kind of razor sharp edge. So we're going to bevel these edges in. So in order to do that, I'm just going to select the edges I need. So first off, let's bevel the whole of this table. So I use bevel on hard edges just so they catch the light, and not only does this aid you in the viewport, it will be very noticeable on the render. So you'll probably hear me bang on about beveling quite a bit in this tutorial. It's not something you should really skip, so let's just bevel in those edges. So where is the bevel? There it is. There we go. And now if I just look around, you see how well this now catches the light, how much more defined it appears to be. So it actually does make a lot of difference. So let's come in and do these ones. So this time I'm just going to go around on this lip we created, making sure that I get all the edges I need, and I'm going to bevel in again. Okay, this one's a bit too much, and this bevel with one segment is actually more of a chamfer. It's very good at catching the light in most all render engines really. So let's set the offset to this something like 0.2, so we've got a much smaller bevel here. And I'm also going to need to bevel the edges of this channel that we've made here. Okay, so just G to bevel again, and that's a pretty small bevel, so no need to change the size. And one last go around, and we are just about done with this table. And I think that was the last edge. Yes, it was. So just G to bevel again. Okay, and when I go back to object mode now, as we look around this table, you can really see the edges a lot more now. Okay, so without that bevel on there, even at render time, this would just kind of fade into the background, and all that work that you've done, adding the edge loops and, you know, cutting the small channel and all that little tiny touches would have been for nothing. There is one last thing I want to do. If I look at the bottom of this table, at the moment it's just a flat surface, and I want this to look like carpenters used one piece of wood and then put a decorative edging strip around. So in order to achieve that, I'm going to make this a little wider. Now that's much easier to do in the 4 view. I'm going to go into vertex mode and just select these vertex and move them down a little bit just to make the tabletop a little wider, just a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to select the face on the bottom. So face, and I'm going to extrude it inwards. So now it looks like a thinner piece of wood has been used to create the top, and then a thicker decorative edging strip has been placed around the table. And you wouldn't think that something like that was really important, because you're rarely going to shoot a table from sort of, you know, this direction, but it all helps cast different shadows, and it just catches the light in a different way. And, you know, I actually like to try and create these things as they would have been made in the real world, wherever possible. It just tends to add a little bit more believability. So let's now get this top the right size. So let's grab all these vertex here and move it inwards. So it's just above the leg like so. Same with this side. Just push inwards a little bit, and this looks fine. This is too long, and so just down there, and there we go. So that's a finish to our little coffee table here, which I will now, as I did with the bed, export out after deleting its history into my sort of ArcViz library. And now I've got a nice attractive little coffee table that'll be pretty good in any scene that I want to put it in. So I'll be back in the next part when we'll actually look at creating one more piece of furniture that will be a little bit more complex than this. Try to kick it up a notch each piece we create. So I hope you've got something out of this, and I hope to see you in the next part. Thanks very much for watching.